Hey, Rama.
Hi, Tracy. So I think I should have created a page, but I wasn't sure exactly where to create it. Do we have a page for the badging and life cycle uh, on the hyperledger.org website?
I don't know. Let me check. Yeah, it looks like we do. Let me copy this into the chat. I just put the link in the Zoom chat.
Yeah, okay. Right. No, I'm this page, but the meeting minutes, I think, do we have should I be creating a meeting minutes for every each of these meetings?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we can just create a subpage under here if we want to do that.
Okay. It's not strictly speaking necessary, right? We can just update we add comments here.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I don't know if anybody else will be joining. It's already 5 minutes. Maybe we can
Yeah,
just have a quick chat. Yeah.
And I'll put a message in the Discord channel just to see if anybody's around.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right.
Okay, I'm just flashing the policy note on the screen.
Okay.
Okay, maybe we can get started. I think it can be just have a quick chat with some of the points I made. And yeah, I didn't even, I really wanted to review the recording of last week's presentation, but I couldn't find it on the site. But Rai just posted it a few minutes ago. So I was still going over it. I mean, I remembered some of the highlights that were discussed, but I should go over it in more detail. Um, yeah, just I think we need to talk about the policy, right? So for everyone, please abide by the Hyperledger Code of Conduct and the antitrust policy. And with that, I think we can get started. Okay, so Tracy, the one of the things that Bobby was suggesting last time, and I joined the onboarding and documentation task force meeting also this Monday. I was listening in on it. Um, there, yeah, I think didn't get any particular insight there, but it's in that meeting. But I think Bobby was asking me about how the documentation updates could, or other doing better documentation could actually feed into the badging process. And I said it's something we have to think about. But I guess if we are going to go with badges, then documentation will be one of those, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So, what do you think about her suggestion for giving credits to different credits or tokens to projects as they go through their life cycle, and we track them on a blockchain, and that's one way to issue badges, like when a project accumulates enough credits or tokens. Do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thought. I think there's some challenges to it that exist. Obviously, who's going to run the blockchain network? Which blockchain network are we going to use? Which framework are we going to use from the Hyperledger projects? You know, I think there's a question of are these tokens or are they verifiable credentials? You know, I think when Bobby was talking about it, she was talking about, you know, spending the tokens in order to get to the next stage. I don't know how that necessarily would work from the perspective of what happens if we decide that a project should be reverted in the life cycle, if you will,
Yeah.
right? Because I do think that we should have some mechanism to move backwards in the life cycle instead of just forward in the life cycle. I think that projects go through many different phases, and you know, depending on whether or not the, you know, maintainers move on to other things, they might end up, you know, going back to an incubation stage, and I think that's fine, right? And I don't know if incubation is the right name for this anymore, and graduate is the right name for it anymore. But anyway, that's probably another topic for discussion. I think that, you know, we just need to think through kind of if we do want to use tokens or credentials, or if there's maybe even a mechanism in GitHub for badges that we could use, right? Like, I want to make sure we think through it completely, because I do think that challenges exist when it comes to you know, just running the network and deciding what tokens can be spent for, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I it's an interesting idea that I think we should explore, but I think we should also be very cautious as we explore that.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with everything you said. And the point about downgrading projects is also one thing I made note about and wanted to discuss. So when we already have like what looks like badges on different GitHub projects, right? You can these are badges. I mean, they of course refer to particular aspects of the project that the maintainers want to highlight. That's why they're here. So presumably we can have a we can tag something onto this, or maybe have a mechanism, or maybe we can potentially mandate a GitHub action that will display a project's badge right above over the in addition to the badges that the maintainers want to display. So that's you think that's yeah. Arun, you had a question?
Right. I think I like that idea. So at least for many of the badges that we have proposed, it makes sense for us to automate and then get that real-time status of the project is in line with what we have said for that particular guide, right? And so creating this should be fine. Like we, in terms of infrastructure, we'll need a place which will run and then capture the result and store it. And if it is GitHub Actions, then maybe GitHub Action triggers the tests to see if project continues to meet a particular batch. And then the result is then captured somewhere and then displaying that as a a visual representation, like a button over here should be fine.
Yeah.
So quick question to you
Go
on that, right? So and I know, like in the previous discussions also we have been discussing about in the previous call also we did bring that up in terms of badges. If you see, many of the things are like self-declarative in nature. For instance, project team claims that, hey, we do follow this process, or we do have this this thing in place, and so for those things, right? For those, what is the approach?
Yeah.
For instance, I
Go
don't
on.
think
Sorry.
you check. I'm sorry, go on.
No, please finish what you're saying. I'll go after you.
I was just giving an example for what those could be. Like legal, for instance, we don't have a way to measure that. And diversity and decentralization, I think as long as we can capture email domain, if we were to automate that, probably that's the way we will do. And again, the maintainers can then claim that, hey, we do have individual contributors, or these are some of the metrics that can easily be altered or modified, right? I
Right.
can go ahead and create a individual's ID, or I could just contribute with my personal email ID than using my company's email ID.
Right. I mean, I can think of ways to automate some of these things. The only thing is it's going to involve somebody's time and effort, like including the suggestion that Bobby had of tracking project credits on a blockchain. So somebody has got to implement that that system. You know, they have to create a chain, make sure that and build the contracts that will going to track the credits, and make sure that they create the client libraries that can be used by the, let's say, the GitHub Actions on each repository to update the badge, and I don't know, maybe GUIs as well. So it seems like a software engineering project by itself to maintain that. I think for these, just taking one for example, legal. I think legal here refers to the policy coverage, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what this page was talking about. So we could maybe have a, I think this can be done by a script, like in a if you have a GitHub action where you just crawl through the entire repository and check to see if various source files or files with well-known extensions have a policy have a policy statement, and if not, maybe it will fail that that test, and then it won't get a badge. But this is different from like the credit system. This is more like a yes or no answer, whether the project source is covered by a policy, and we could maybe specify that it needs to be Apache. And if it is, then that the legal badge could get displayed on the through the GitHub action, or otherwise it won't.
So my
Yeah.
understanding is that we already have some GitHub actions running within Hyperledger
Okay.
that are doing license scanning.
Okay.
So scanning the projects to see what licenses exist, and if there's any licenses that are not the right licenses, right, or approved licenses, I guess is the right way to say that, by Hyperledger, then they are flagged. So there's actually an issue right now in Bevel for the Bevel operator that has some source files that are contained in the repository that are not compliant, if you will, right? So I think we could utilize that particular GitHub action that's running already, and just like you said, it's a flag, right? True, false. Is it passing? Is it not passing?
Cool. Yeah, as you and I think you're right. We have the Apache 2 license here. I'm not sure if this is a result of the GitHub action or if it's just like it's been forced to be displayed here. But yeah,
It's probably the latter if I had to guess, but because I actually didn't know about those GitHub Actions until recently when that issue showed up, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm also working in the Open Wallet Foundation. We're trying to figure out what tools we'll need to have running, and that was one of the things that came up. And I'm like, oh, okay, so we have a GitHub Action running with it with across Hyperledger. That's great. So we just need to make use of what we have, and I think that's going to be a you know, maybe something we can ask Rai about is what sort of tools do we already have running within the ecosystem, and see if there's things that we can utilize that already exist.
Right. Just wondering, could we adopt the same process for other kind of badges like documentation? I guess it's not something you can automatically scan for. It has to be programmed by each project in a unique way, I think. Same testing also, I think we'll have to maybe, I mean, testing at least we can potentially automate or rather figure out what the percentage of coverage is, and maybe have a have badges that are issued based on what percentage of the code you have covered, like 25%, 50%, and so on. I don't know how useful that'll be. I think it's at this point we don't really have any strong criteria for how much code coverage the tests ought to have, and I think this point was raised in one of the earlier TOC meetings, and I think people generally agreed that we should leave this to the individual maintainers. So I don't know if what we'll do about a testing badge. Apart from the fact that we'll just check to see if various modules at least have some kind of a test. Like if there's a JavaScript module, we just make sure that there's a test folder with some tests that are running, I guess. So if we are going to use a token system, like how feasible do you think it would be? Like we have to build a fair amount of software to get it running. Right? Is that something we should be shooting for, or should we be going in a more manual direction? Like at least try to get the badge system at least working. Like we list all the different badges that are going to be issued, and how the reviews will happen, how we handle upgrades and downgrades, and maybe we have a recommendation for or a design for a system that will track credits, as Bobby was talking about, but that will be a project for a later date. Would that work?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this task force should be very focused on what it's trying to do, and what it should be trying to do is, figure out what those badges are if we want to do badges, and determining what the life cycle is, and the requirements for those life cycle stages, right? And the, when do we move between those different states, if you will. I think if we can make recommendations that, this is something that could be looked at as a future project. It could be something that we, when we talk about this particular task force, we might want to write a blog post to say like, hey, if you're interested in doing, some open source work, right, or getting involved in a project, this could be an interesting project for you to take on. But I don't think it's a responsibility necessarily of this task force to make that happen by the end of the task force, right? I think let's keep this narrow and focused, and make sure that we can accomplish the original task that we set out with.
Yep, that makes sense. In fact, this could be a good mentorship project.
Definitely.
Yeah. So on the diagram itself, is everybody happy with the diagram? Do you want to go to something that looks a little more linear, like the LF networking model? I mean, here I think the one uh, state that actually feeds back into an earlier state is dormant. I think there's no other state that actually feeds back into an older state. So, strictly speaking, do we need a dormant state, or do we just move back from graduated to incubated?
Yeah, so I think our diagram has gotten very complex. I think it's a bit, challenging to figure out these dormant versus deprecated versus end of life.
Yeah.
I know you've got the LF networking diagram there. I just put a link in that will take you to the diagram for Open Wallet Foundation, which is slightly, I don't know, it's similar to what we have, but different. And I guess it's similar to LF networking as well. It does include labs in there as a step. And so feel free to think through whether or not this is something that we want to consider as well. I do know that when we put together the Open Wallet Foundation life cycle, we were a lot more specific about what was required to get into each of these stages, right? What the acceptance criteria was for each stage. We also have that annual review process, which allows us to determine whether or not something is still meeting those criteria, right? So that if they're not meeting the criteria, they can move to a different stage or be advanced, if you will, right? Or downgraded, I guess, if that makes sense. So yeah, I do think we should try to make our diagram a bit more simpler than it is today, and determine what the right things are that we actually want as far as the stages.
Thanks. Yeah, this actually looks quite clean. I mean, you have a proposal stage, and then you have a cycle. Wait, is this it's where does this actually go? It goes from proposal to impact.
Yeah, so
okay.
Your proposal can go to any of the active stages.
Ah,
The first stage would be potentially labs, right? That's the lowest level, or
okay.
however you want to say that. The entry level, if you will. Then it can grow to growth stage, right? Which is basically what we would consider our incubation stage. It's when you're trying to create that growth plan, figuring out, how to bring in new maintainers and grow the community and things like that. And then the impact stage is this project is now being used by a number of adopters, and it's pretty much going through your long-term support releases, and is really what you would consider a project that is fairly immature, right, in what it's doing. And then obviously you can move back and forth between any of these stages. If for some reason, the project goes through some sort of major change in its direction or what it's doing, it might go back to the growth stage, right? Or if it loses a number of maintainers, it might go back to the growth stage. So I think it's really just a matter of what makes sense from the perspective of, where the project's at. We also then have like the inactive stage, right, where the project is reaching its end of life. There's other projects that have come in and kind of replaced it, or there's other projects that might make more sense for people to be adopting today, right? We just say this is now an emeritus stage, and there's no real expectations as far as support for that at that point. There may be some, there may not be some, depending on where it's at. But yeah, that's kind of the idea behind these different stages. And then just like I said, in the active stage, whichever state it happens to be in, is looked at on an annual basis, just like we introduced the annual review process to see if it needs to change. If there's recommendations to say move it from labs to growth, or growth to impact, or impact back to growth, or whatever the case may be, right? So it's really an open sort of process there for just, understanding where a project's at that point in its life cycle.
Got it. Thanks. Yeah, I had actually missed the arrows, but I see there are arrows here. These are meant to be,
Yeah,
I
there's
guess,
tiny,
the
tiny little arrows.
tiny arrows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know. This is made from Mermaid, and I don't know why those are tiny versus the other ones that are larger.
Uh,
Because there's no like, this is the expected state to move versus this is
Yeah.
the non-expected state. So they should actually be the same size, but Mermaid just decided what size it was going to create those arrows at.
Okay. It's understandable now. So here yeah, potentially we could merge dormant and deprecated then, you think? I think dormant is supposed to reflect the fact that nobody has been working on the project for a while, right? There's been no commit activity, I guess. Deprecated, I guess, is that the project been superseded by a different project. Okay, I can see why you would have those two separate stages, but
Yeah, I think it just adds some confusion, right? I think dormant is not necessarily being used as it should be, right? I think a lot of projects hit dormant and they don't tell us they're in dormant, if you will. The idea behind dormant was that there's some potential expectation that it will start up again. And I think that mostly what's happened is that people have stepped away and we've kind of put things in dormant. They probably should have went to deprecate it. But I don't think we've necessarily really figured out what is right for dormant. We introduced dormant when Hyperledger Quilt was going through this process of they weren't sure whether or not they were going to continue or not, and they asked if we could introduce a new stage. And that's when we introduced dormant. And since then we haven't necessarily, like I said, used it in a manner that seems appropriate. But I wouldn't mind even combining all dormant, deprecated, end of life to just that emeritus type state, or an archived type state where just because something is archived doesn't mean it can't come back to life, right? Just because it's the code is still available, it's people can jump back in and get involved again. So I think just recognizing that there's a state in which the project is not currently being maintained or is heading towards that, if you will, end of life, where the expectation is to move to some other project, then I think that's something that we could consider.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, I was just thinking, even if you decide to retain the dormant state, why does it need to go back to incubation? Maybe it can, because it's already fulfill the criteria needed for graduation, right? It's just been lack of activity that led it to the dormant state. So
yeah, so I think,
yeah.
Sorry, I think the reason that we decided that we wanted to move it back to incubation was because the expectation was probably that some of the maintainers had left and there would be a new set of maintainers. And we weren't sure whether or not that set of maintainers would necessarily meet the criteria for what would be graduated, right? Which is that diversity of maintainers. So for example, let's say that we had taken Explorer and dormant, and then one company decided, you know what, I want to bring this back to life because we're using it. Then that company would add their maintainers to that and say, okay, we don't necessarily have that diversity anymore because it's now just a single organization and not multiple organizations that are maintaining that. Not that Explorer was ever graduated, but I'm just trying to bring an example of what we could use some other project Foo, right? If Foo was graduated, had a set of maintainers that came from multiple organizations, then those maintainers all went away, right? A new
Right.
set of maintainers came from a single organization. That's kind of the idea behind
Right.
why we went to incubation instead of dormant. But yeah, I mean, I think what we can do is make a decision based on where the project's at. I think that's the best way to handle this sort of stuff because, you know, if something is emeritus and it comes back to life or archived and comes back to life, then that's going to depend on how it comes back to life as far as what criteria it actually ends up meeting. So I think if we define the criteria properly, then it doesn't matter where it ends up.
Got it. And on the review criteria, I think if I think if we go by, if the review criteria is driven by the number of badges that a project has, then
Mhm.
I'd imagine that some of the badges are going to never expire. Like even if the project is not actually being maintained, I imagine maybe it still meets the legal requirements. But some badges, I'm just wondering if they will degrade over time. And if that is a criteria that we can then use to show that, I think we would have to explicitly have a badge that is designed to degrade over time if the maintainers or the project feature set is not meeting particular criteria that you set out for, like maybe
Yeah.
Commit activity, or maybe how quickly they react to security vulnerability reports. Again, it's going to be challenging to track these in an automated way. I think as you mentioned, as Arun has also said, we probably have to there'll be some TOC member who'll have to go and look at how fast they've been or how quickly or how frequently they've been responding to these things. But that might be something which would I mean we would have particular criteria that would decay over time unless the maintainers are actively doing the things they should be doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's that metrics page that I sent out the last time on I forget which project it was, maybe CNCF. Yeah, this one where we could take a look at all of these different metrics along the side and see if those are metrics that make sense for us to put badges around, right? Or the changes or that sort of thing. And maybe we could do a similar sort of thing where there's just this, this page of information that kind of shows where they're at and whether or not it meets the badge requirements.
Right.
To me, one of the interesting ones is the commit days or the days since last commit, right? I think those are interesting because you can kind of start to see then when things are going dormant, when those numbers start to increase. Right. And maybe, there's a certain point at which the badge becomes yellow or, I think we can, based on these different sorts of metrics, decide what the right things are to take a look at. And I don't think all of this is necessary. But I do think some of these are really interesting as we go through them and look.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think the
Okay,
trends are the interesting one, right? If you can see trends of, we had 30,000 commits over the past 6 months, but only, or how am I trying to say this? The 3 months prior we had 30,000, but this past 3 months we only had 5,000. That's a big change in the number of commits, right? And then we should start asking questions at that point around why is that happening? Was the last 3 months summer vacation, and so that's a typical drop in the number of commits, or is it for some other reason, like people are stepping away?
True. I mean, it could just be that those are major set of features, especially let's say during the mentorship program period when you had a
Mhm.
lot of commits happening towards the end of the program, because maybe like four mentees were working on the project, but after they finished and the next 3 months it's just been patching security patches. So that could be a reason. So I guess maybe that probably would not be a reason to downgrade the project status, but yeah, I think it will. It's something that we can. We should figure out what are the things that we can alert the TSC members to, and as you say,
Exactly.
a dramatic drop that would be a cause for alert. So, okay, then I think maybe the next steps should be I guess a proposal to simplify the diagram. That's one thing.
Mhm.
And listing the different badges. I think we already have some here. This is borrowed from the earlier wiki pages. I think you and other members of the TSC at the time had come up with this list. I just proposed one more, like a security vulnerability compliance. So maybe have a list of maybe I'll just make a comprehensive list of badges that I can think of, and we can then iterate over that the next call and see if those are acceptable. And once we shortlist the set of badges we think are useful for projects, then we can go back to the workflow diagram or the lifecycle diagram, and then uh, put a set of badges or assign a set of badges to each state, which indicate what those states qualifications are. Uh, that work for the next steps.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
One last thing I wanted to do before closing was I think in the last week's call, Arno said that the labs or rather he mentioned why the labs were completely excluded from this project lifecycle. That it was supposed to be more of an experimental. It mostly be supposed to be an experiment and sort of like a playground for developers rather than be a proper project.
Mhm.
Do you think we should still keep it separate, or do you think we should include it in the in this life cycle as being something that is expected to eventually go towards incubation?
Yeah, I think that as long as we continue to make it an easy entry path for people who are looking to do experiments and explore what they're doing, right? So that we're not adding a lot of requirements to labs. I think that's fine if we include it in the overall process. But if at some point we start looking at that and we start adding requirements to become a lab, I think that's when we've strayed away from really the intent of what labs is, right? It was supposed to be an easy entry, not very
It's not
I
an
don't know
onerous
what the
process
right
to
word
become a
is.
lab. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think people are a bit more hesitant to approach the TLC with a project proposal than they are to come to labs and say, this is my first time contributing to open source and I want to try this out. And this is a topic that I've been researching or interested in, and so just making that process simple and less frightening, right, if you will, for people to participate is the idea. And then hopefully other people will see that stuff is happening and be interested to start working with those groups of people, and eventually it becomes a project. I do think that is the intention for some of these things is like Cacti and Bevel, and Firefly and others that have started in the labs area, they've actually become projects. And so I think we should recognize that does happen, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So can I suggest in that case, as you say, we can leave the labs out of the project lifecycle, but when we drop the list of badges and the criteria that projects can fulfill to acquire a particular badge, that will apply to both a lab project and a full project. So a lab in its life cycle can keep accumulating badges, and then when it's ready to make a proposal, that of course will be the set of badges that it has acquired will be taken into account to determine whether it can move to incubation.
I think that's fine.
Okay, I didn't have anything else to discuss today. You or I think still just the three of us, right? Yeah, do you or Arun have anything else you wanted to bring up? Any other suggestions for me?
Not for me.
Arun, anything?
No, Rahman.
Well, thank you both so much for coming on, and yeah, for all the great suggestions, and we'll try to make more progress by yeah, I said this as a bi-weekly call because this is like 7:30 Friday evening my time, and I didn't want to spend
Yeah.
this particular slot every week.
Understood.
So yeah. So the next meeting will be 2 weeks from now, and I'll hopefully have an updated draft with more fleshed out details by then.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you, and yep.
Yep.
See you at the TUC meeting next week.
All right,
Thank
have
you.
a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.